I want to introduce you to one of my favorite new drills to work on clutch control, balance, and cambered turns. Ray Peters introduced me to this Moto track stand, or as he calls it, the clutch drill. Now this is very similar to a bicycle track stand, where rolling forward and backwards can actually keep you balanced. And there's so many benefits, working on throttle and clutch control, balance, learning to kind of feel the bike, when it might potentially wash out the front tire or lose traction on the rear, when trying to turn in a cambered situation and you're forcing the steering with your handlebars rather than leaning the bike. It's so tempting to force the turn with your hands or dip your head to the inside, and this is going to help work through that. Now, you can adjust where the apex of the turn is or where you are in the hill as far as a little bit more uphill or kind of just barely starting the uphill turn. You can also change the steepness of the hillside. You can practice in your yard or even on an angled pallet. There's really no way to do this wrong, and it's going to be challenging at first. I remember I first started doing this drill and was like, I'm no good at this drill, and so I stopped doing it. Now here am I a year later thinking, gosh, I need to really continue to practice this. The goal isn't really to roll backwards as far as trying to ride a fakie. The goal is just good clutch and throttle control, as well as balance. So we're actually going to be rolling forward a little bit and backwards a little bit. Rolling backwards slightly actually helps you when you're out of balance and starting to lean or fall down the hill. Then pulling forward or rolling a little bit forward is going to help if you're leaning too far up the hill. Giving just the slightest amount of gas will keep your engine from stalling out, and knowing how much gas to give is something that takes time until you can find that sweet spot. It's somewhat normal to choke out the bike during this drill as you begin to learn to feel and understand what's too little throttle or too much clutch engagement. This is one of the most realistic ways to practice and get better acquainted with your clutch and throttle on a hillside. It's almost like snuggling with the hillside. Now we're going to do this with no brakes being pressed. It's just going to be gravity and your clutch and throttle. You can actually choose to just not even cover the rear brake and the front brake, so you're not tempted to accidentally use these as you start to get better at this. Now this takes time, and even just doing slow, really slow circles on a hillside or figure eights is something similar but not quite the same. This really changes your understanding of how to stand on the pegs and be in good body positioning. We want to be centered over the bike. We don't want to be pulling on the bars or leaning on the bars. You're going to fatigue very quickly. Now, in order to do this well, we're going to break it down into a few simple steps. The first, we're going to turn in a slow circle on a slight hillside and take it slower and slower, especially in the portion where you're turning back up into the hill. The slower speed means that you can't lean in as much. Eventually, you're going to find that balance point where you're not leaning in enough, and you might even probably fall down the hill or turn down the hill. Now you've found where it helps to actually roll back. But instead of turning back down the hill, once we've found that balance point or even slightly a little bit too far to the outside, we're going to keep the wheel still pointed in and pull in the clutch. Number two, rolling backwards assists in your balance to come back in line when you've leaned slightly too far down the hillside. This is going to allow the bike to come back underneath you where the top of you and your head is slightly to fall to the outside, rolling the lower portion of the bike and your feet back down the hill allows you to come back into balance. This is a very tricky element, not just with the controls, but also because we're not used to rolling backwards. So even just an inch or two is going to be eye-opening the first time, but keep at it. All right, number three, applying a little more turn into the hillside and finding that clutch engagement point, you can actually add friction to the front tire by turning in a little bit more. That additional friction is kind of like it's giving you something to lean against or push against. This is similar to pushing into a wall or something when you're trying to static balance. You may be able to even just hold it there, but we're aiming to get comfortable within the slightest need to roll forwards and backwards, not necessarily just press in and hold it. So for me, I'm going to be focused on this clutch drill rather than static balance in the garage. I'll be working on this hopefully 3 to 4 times a week for 10 or 15 minutes. Now, I've realized that this really shows that my left side is much better than my right, so I plan to spend about twice as much time on that right side. If you're looking for other trials type drills like these, clutch drills, turning, and wheelie drills, you can check out the link below where you can download a list of warm-up style drills and see these demonstrated as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.